I want to do a little non-scripted chat today about what has happened to our sense of adventure as a culture. And I'll start by talking about what it was like when I was young. As a child, during our free time, which was plenty because we had no social media back then, you'd go out in the morning to play and you wouldn't come home again until the streetlights went out. So you got into all kinds of mischief, but pretty much all of us survived, and we had this real sense of adventure, to take risks, to face the consequences if we were a little bit too adventurous, and to get back up, dust ourselves off, and get out again and play, full of bruises and scrapes, but boy did we have a fun time being young. Life, I think, has to be about accepting a certain amount of risk, and that seems to be not only totally absent these days, but being dumbed out of us to the point where we must cower in our homes in fear of this mysterious virus that has a very high recovery rate and really only affects a small percentage of the population, which we now understand to be the elderly and the infirm. When I was a young woman, all of 18, I jumped on a plane, went off to Europe with a backpack on, and hitchhiked around and met all kinds of fascinating people. The idea back then was, at that age, you were an adult and you paid for whatever you did, and you also, if you were so inclined, stepped out on a limb and took a risk. Again, I come back to that word again, risk, which just seems to be so missing from our lives these days. Now, young people are forbidden from mingling and traveling. They can't live without their devices. So they can all be sitting at the same table, but they won't be talking to one another. They'll be texting one another from 3 feet apart. So that's maybe why they accept the social distancing so well. Although I do believe a lot of them are getting very depressed. It's not normal for young people not to date or gather. Media and the politicians have created a culture of fear and mistrust, in particular in Canada, where you get scolded and scorned for not abiding by the rules that these so-called experts make, which change all the time and are proven most of the time to be wrong. And yet, the population seems to lap it up. There's over 50% of Canadians that think that these lockdowns are just great and they just need to keep on going until we can eradicate a virus, which cannot be eradicated. And kids, while kids have been pulled from school, they've had helicopter parents now for some time. They're not allowed to take any sorts of risks. That idea of going out and not coming home until dusk would probably get you a visit from the police these days. So I'm just going to conclude by saying, if we don't pay attention to the signs, the Canadian people are really showing what modeled the good German back in the 1930s. Without resistance and without a real fight for our freedoms, and I don't mean violence, I mean asserting our rights according to our charter, we have to show that we want our freedom. If we continue to submit and behave like sheeple, it will get to the point where it will be too lost and too far gone for us to recoup even a semblance of what it was like in the before times. Pay attention, because I think we're going into a worse year this year, 2021, than we had in 2020. We're the only nation right now, Canada and in particular Ontario and Toronto, that is locked down tighter than a drum, and our stats show us faring exactly the same as other Western cultures who have not followed that route. So what are we doing?